Emily, thanks so much for being on. I want to ask you just kind of a crazy fun question to start, just a icebreaker, if you will, as we say. I don't know if they say that in the UK, but we're gonna say, what is your favorite dessert? And if it's ice cream, what flavor?
It's not ice cream.
Okay, okay, that's good
uh,
to know.
yeah, it probably that's my French side coming out. It's crème brûlée, crème brûlée. Do you have ever tried that
Yeah,
one? Yeah, yeah. So that would be my
yeah.
favorite one. Yeah, yeah.
I love that. There's a here in DC. There's a donut shop that has kind of like paid homage or maybe just destroyed the whole culture of creme brulee, but they have a creme brulee donut, and then they literally fire it up on top,
Fire
and
that.
it's
I like
yeah,
that.
yeah, it's beautiful and magical. So that's really cool. That's a good choice, obviously. Yeah,
Yeah.
obviously, that's awesome. Very cool. So yeah, we were talking a little bit pre-show, but every once in a while, I'll ask in our Facebook group for the Bearded Talk community, and just kind of get a pulse on who are other photographers or members heroes, and like who do they look up to, whose work do they really like right now, and I want to know, I want to keep my finger on the pulse, right? And somebody recommended you, and I
Thanks.
was like, okay, cool, let's check her out. And I was like, what do you like about their work, or what is their thing? And for you, obviously, it was like your creative process and kind of, just a really unique look that I think in the States is either long past or hasn't happened yet. Like, I think
Oh,
you're either ahead or behind work wise in a time thing. Like, there's a few New York City photographers that I think have a similar thing, but they would
yeah.
say they're trying to shoot in a French style. So I'm like, okay, well, we got to go to the source, right? We got to go talk. So, but yeah, thanks for coming on, and so I
Thanks
just
for
want to
having me.
know a little bit more about your background. Were you always a photographer? Where are you from? All that kind of stuff. Kind of give me a background to where we are today.
Yeah. So I'm French, and I was born in just outside of Paris. But my parents moved me to the US when I was really
Oh,
young, when I was about one, and I lived
okay,
about almost 5 years over there. So I think I
okay.
kind of
Where
grew up
at?
just outside of Boston.
Oh, okay, okay,
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
That's not bad.
And I thought, oh well, from what I remember, it wasn't too bad.
Yeah.
And then they moved back to France. So then from age five onwards, I kind of grew up in France, outside of Paris, and then in the south of France. So my sort of childhood, teenage years are a bit of mix of culture,
Mm,
and always I always wanted to go back to the States, and I always spend summers there and try to keep my English up. um, but in terms of background in photography, no, I've not always done photography. I actually studied 7 years to become a lawyer, and I used to
oh
do
wow.
my specialty was intellectual property law, which can come quite
Okay.
handy in our field.
I
um,
bet. I bet.
yeah, so initially I think I always had a fascination for imagery and photography because I was doing it throughout uni. And I
Mm,
always loved movies. For me, movies, but also, the director of photography, kind of that kind of
yeah.
job, how they do it and the angling and the light. That was always an interest. But, I didn't feel
Yeah.
like a serious job when I was growing up. I don't know if you had faced
Sure.
that, but it wasn't something like easy to get into, especially in France. So I went to law,
Mm,
but I think going into intellectual property was maybe a way to connect to the creative
sure.
and get involved in it in a not as fun way.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was my background in terms of training or university. But I practiced for a few years in different
Okay.
countries. The problem is when you move with law, every time you move, you have to, pass new exams to be able to practice in
Mm,
that country. And
yeah. Like recertify, kind of.
yeah, so you could work sort of as a legal counsel, but after a while, it meant that if I didn't pass certain tests, I was never considered as
Yeah.
what they call in Europe the solicitors rather than a lawyer.
Okay.
Um,
Yep.
so after doing, a few hopping around in different countries, we had a bit of time off with my husband, and photography had always been in the background. And I thought, well, it might take a bit of time to, play around and see what I can do with it. And The dream job would have been shooting for Vanity Fair and portraits, but no one is waiting for you to come in and do that. So weddings were changing at that time. It was around 2010, 2011, and there was that more modern approach. And I was like, oh, well, weddings that kind of way. That's interesting. I slowly reached out to. I was in southern France at that time, and I slowly reached out to a few local photographers who were really sweet and had me come and second shoot, and I kind of liked it and enjoy it, and then people seemed to like it too, and it kind of snowballed from there after a few
That's
years.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And then when did you make the jump from second shooting to like, okay, yeah, I can do this for me? Or, is in the States, maybe worldwide, there's a fascination with like going full time, right? And it's like, okay, when was that point for you when you were like, maybe not I did it, but maybe you're like, I'm doing it, I'm making it happen?
I'd say it took a year and a half to say, okay, I'm doing this. So my husband and I had lived 2 years in the Middle East in Oman. And working over there, I've been able to save up a bit. And so we had that 6-month time where he was doing his own thing and I was doing my own thing in the south of France. And those first 6 months, I liked it. And the year after, I'd say I tried to see if I could get a few clients. So I think the whole process took about a year and a half for me to, I'm assuming it's the same for you, but it's just see if I like it. It's a different thing taking photos because you enjoy it and actually making it your job.
A business. Yeah.
But I did enjoy it and people seemed to like it. So after a year and a half, I decided to go ahead. In between, I thought it'd be the right time to have a child. So I couldn't
love it.
I couldn't just set up a business and go for it. And we moved 2 countries in between all that. So it's complicated. I know it's always complicated. People look at me like too much information, but
no, we like information here.
Okay, good. So it's good. So I'd say early 2012 is when I set up my business officially in the UK.
Wow.
Yeah, and went sort of
That's awesome.
Foolish time with a newborn.
That sounds like a good either podcast episode or if you ever wrote a book, Foolish Time.
Yeah.
Or full-ish time. You could kind of play with it a little bit.
Remember, I'm French, my English is going to go weird sometimes.
No, I love it though, because it's are you making a bad decision? And it could be FULL-ish time. I'm full-ish time, That's super cool. Did you, so a little bit of savings and then, your husband, obviously, it sounds like he had a job. So do you think that helped a little bit of, not a full safety net by any means, but you're like, hey, I have a safe place to kind of, if I mess up, there's not as much risk.
Yeah, I think my luck is definitely that we were a team and 2 of us. And also the fact that I had time to build it up. To bring in the clients, to also go second shoot, and to also be a new mom, which means I didn't have to work full time. That really helped.
Yeah.
The first 6 months, we both went completely. He was trying to build his business, and I was testing out photography. And towards the end of that 6-7 months, he's like, "Hey, let's have a baby," and move to Amsterdam. And after 8 months in Amsterdam, and I almost had the baby, we thought, let's go to London. So I think because we align on all that, and he had a job, and because I was having a child, it sort of worked. He would work a bit more, and he got out and hunted for a job in London. So that definitely helped, because then there was a stream of income there. Definitely, I think that's a chance somewhere, because it takes a few years to get the ball rolling, and even figure out what type of clients you're after, where you're good, how the market works. So I think that was definitely I've answered your question pretty took a long time there, but being 2 is definitely been helpful. Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. Yeah, I was always kind of curious. Everybody kind of does it differently, these days. And I talk to a lot of photographers where I'm just that scene in The Notebook where they're like, "What do you want?" And I'm just like, if it's to only shoot, 10 weddings a year, be an awesome mom, and whatever, then just do that, or there's nothing wrong with that, as long as it pays the bills, or if you have other the freedom of strategizing, I think, is my favorite thing of life can look like how you want it to look. but it's like, okay, there is the business side where it's like, okay, yeah, if we take less weddings, what do they need to cost? How good does my brand need to be? What kind of market, can kind of work there? But I love that. That's really cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
What's it like working, I'm going to generalize and say in Europe, but really internationally where, for you, will it be similar to here where, at least for me, I'm like around a few different states. It's not uncommon. I was in a 2-hour drive yesterday to another state. But for you, is it common to be like, okay, yeah, one weekend I have, a wedding in Paris. The next weekend I have a wedding in Amsterdam. Mm-hmm. I just hop on the train the day before, and come back the day after. What's that kind of process look for somebody like you? Yeah. Or are you kind of like, no, I only want to be, wherever you're at in London, and only shoot there?
It's evolved over the years. The first few years, because I was new to the London market and just new to the market in general, I was kind of trying my best to get some, opportunities and figure things out. And also I had a newborn baby, which means that I couldn't really travel too much or too far. So I'd say initially I was really, London, the UK, and I had a few in France because I had sort of started there. So, but I didn't put everything into destination or traveling. I love traveling. I've lived in like 7 countries and always up for an explore. So for me, that was not even an issue, but it was just not practically possible. And I think as the year went by, and my business build up in my name as well, because you know how it is after your name start going around, you get more inquiries. Totally. I was able to take on a bit more. I did have a second child in a way as well, so that as well limited me. So I think for me, it was more about finding a way to make the UK and London look sexy and editorial and play with what I was trying to achieve. And then if I had, 3 to 4 destination weddings and hopping to Paris or hopping to France or to Italy, that wasn't an issue, and maybe sometimes we made a holiday of it. I had one in Ibiza, and my husband's like, I'm coming to that.
Be like, do you need an assistant? It'd be very wasteful for me, but I'll gladly come assist. That's awesome.
Yeah. So but now in a way is that it, things build up, and now I can take more destinations. Like, well, not in the time of COVID, but in sort of pre-COVID and hopefully post, I can travel a bit more. And I'd say it's a split of time, but it's also the opportunity. And I don't mind traveling. In Europe, it's so easy. Like you say, you drive 2 hours, I'd fly 2 hours from London, and London's well connected, and I can get to a lot of pretty good destinations. But I'll go further too. I have had my few in the US or in Australia or things like that. Yeah.
Sure. Pre-COVID, what did your workload kind of look like on a yearly basis? Was that 10 weddings a year, 30 weddings a year? Have you found your sweet spot? Now that the kids have grown a little bit.
My sweet spot has always, I'd say, in the beginning was maybe 10. Now it's around 15 to 20, but. Okay. Yeah, usually it ends up 15 to 20, some years 20, but that's my ideal scenario.
Okay, awesome. That's really cool. And then will you do engagement sessions for those couples sometimes, or I guess it depends if they're a destination, it might not be nearby.
So that was I did do it a lot in the beginning. I think it depends a bit culturally. Where are my couples from? So I think in the States it's really popular. Here it is popular, but I had it for a while and now it's gone a bit quiet, and occasionally I'll have a couple asking for it. So it's a mix. It's a bit of a mixture, but I would definitely do that if they're up for it, or if someone is traveling here and they wanted to do sessions. Or I've done some in Paris. That's the advantage. Like you jump on the train, Eurostar, and you've done some in Paris. So that definitely has been part of it as well. Okay,
awesome. That's interesting. Like it's not a, I'd probably say in the States, 60% of wedding couples, maybe 70, if they're booking a wedding, they're going to book a session, right? Yeah. And I think it's, at least the way that, I sell it over here or other people sell it is, I'm not big into the fear selling of like, hey, you want to be ready for, wedding day, you've never had your photo taken before, but I do want to, I'm big on fun and just like, hey, it's nice to, you can still get dressed up, but not necessarily wedding level dressed up.
Yeah.
Let's do it somewhere that means a lot to you,
Yeah.
or this is a chance to get weird where on wedding day, we don't have a chance to kind of have a little bit more fun. It's kind of a structured day.
Yeah.
Where this is like your, freestyle, or like, I don't know if you're like, if you're a musician, you're like, this is our chance to jam. We get to kind of like have a little bit more fun.
That's a good way to do it.
Yeah. And then it's still practically, at least for my couples, I say, I don't do a ton of like posing. I'll set people up and then kind of direct them. But I say this will be very similar to wedding day. So like you will already know, and kind of feel it out. And on wedding day, you'll feel more comfortable because we did this. But so that's really interesting. That's cool though. I mean, it's like, why not? And if somebody called you and was like, hey, let's do a session in Paris, you're like, all right, I'll be there in a few hours.
Yeah, exactly. I think it also, a lot of my couples don't like having their picture taken, are not comfortable in front of the camera. That's the profile I seem to get a lot.
That's a global issue.
And also it's a very, I think my English clients, some will love having that portrait session, some dread it. And I think I don't see as many photos on the walls as I've seen in some of my, American friends' house, where it's really part of the culture, with graduation and this and that, where you put photos up on the wall, which is great. And here, even if I do like a family session, sometimes the parents will want to be in it, but a lot of times like, oh no, I'm okay, I don't want to be in it. And I'm like, no, you want to be in it because your kids are going to want to see you later one day in those pictures. So that's the interesting thing I've noticed here, and so maybe that plays a little bit a part,
Sure, no, totally, yeah. It's like I think it's one level of comfortability to get your photo taken. You're like, okay, I did it, and then you're like, wait, I'm expected to put this image of me on the wall, So like, I even as a cocky American, I'm like, that's still weird, It's still like, my wife wanted some wedding photos up on the wall, and like, obviously it makes sense. We're happy, we had a good time, it's cool, but you're still like, photos of us, huh? Like, people walk into our house and it's us. So
did you do it in the end? Do you have pictures on your wall?
We have three. We have three. Yeah.
If you come in my house, you'd be like, where are the pictures? I've got the same thing, like 2 or 3 in one room. It's weird, isn't it?
Yeah. Like I have, like behind me, for the audio people, where you can go watch on YouTube, but like this is like a cool scientific chart I found in like a thrift shop about color theory. Yeah. This is a photo by Kid Noble, who's a photographer here in DC. Like I'm big into art, like, and then let's see, guitars, Manhattan poster, I want to be inspired, and usually you don't look at yourself and be inspired, but maybe there's a lesson there for both of us, is that we should look at ourselves and be like, hey, you can do it. So
exactly.
That's really cool. Can I ask, and definitely say no if not, just kind of curiosity for you, where you're at in your market, and you can even tell me if you know if this is uncommon or pretty common, like what does an average wedding look like for you guys cost wise, for you specifically? Both locally, and then I just assume it's probably the same price, but you charge for a destination, a little extra for travel. So what does that look like? And if it's in euros, that's totally fine. We'll do the math later.
So it's progressed over the years. It didn't start like that.
Sure.
Currently, this year, it's not in euros, it's in pounds. It's around the start price of £8,000 to £9,000. Depending, but then, and it's the same where, wherever I go, what will change is, if I need second shooters, if I need, if it's like a unlimited coverage, or if it's a shorter coverage, and the travel as well, and how far it is. So that's what's going to change the price a fair bit.
Sure.
But in terms of where I'm on the market, I'd say, I don't know everyone's right here. I think that's pretty good. I would say maybe that's the upper market. But then again, I could be, as I said, it's something, some people talk about it, some don't. So you never fully know where people are at. So for this year, that's where I'm at. And then, I think also the budget, that's something I talked a fair bit with some of my US colleagues, photographers. It's same thing. In America, people will spend money on photography. I've seen this change here, and it's real. I mean, I don't think I could have charged that 4 or 5 years ago.
Sure. Yeah.
So I think it's improving here a lot. And people understand that it has a value to have a good photographer or photographer they like, someone they enjoy.
Yeah, totally.
So yeah, I think that's good that it's doing that in sort of in Europe,
Yeah. Yeah. You're welcome. I'm just kidding. I'm totally kidding. I'm kidding. But no, that's totally cool. Yeah. I remember I have friends, one of our teammates who just shot for me last weekend. She, her husband, I think, was in the State Department here. And so they had to move to Germany for a few years. And so she tried to start up the wedding business there. And, she was like, this is probably 7 years ago. And she could just not charge, she wasn't high end here by any means, but she could just not even charge close to it because it wasn't valued, it wasn't as important. And, but it makes sense. Like over time, these trends, we can all, 20 years ago, nobody was shooting a flat lay, right?
No. Yeah.
Like very rare. So all these trends kind of bubble up, and some stay and some leave. And but I'm all for photographers making money. So I'm a big,
me too. Yeah. Any creative or artist or I'm being able to live out of your art is great.
Yeah.
I think it depends as well who your clients are in Europe. And each country as well. So I know I shouldn't say Europe we're going to talk about Europe for the geography for the UK, but they're out of it now, so I shouldn't say that. Depending on the country and sort of the average salary of people, I found that they're able to spend more or less. So if I shoot in France, it's not necessarily French people. It's often, other people coming from overseas to get married in that location, or in Italy as well. It seems to be that. So that adds another sort of layer, to understand that kind of the fees and where you at.
Yeah, because it's one of those things where even in the US, if we have a destination wedding, right, it might be South Florida, Mexico, Caribbean, Bahamas, something tropical or fun if it's kind of close. But at the same time, Paris, Italy, the south of France, right? Those are very big tourist destinations. And then, if you already have the budget to, Lake Como, right? Like Lake Como, everybody loves that.
Or Capri,
Yeah, exactly. So it's, and then the decision is like, if they're from the States or wherever, do we hire a photographer we like here or try and find one there?
Try and find one,
Yeah, and so I've been on both sides of the aisle, both sides of that kind of thing where I've shot some destination weddings and they just brought a whole team from our city that they liked, which I was like, whoa, but that was cool, and they like their vendors, right? And that's what we all preach.
Yeah.
And then I've been on some where I feel like photographers, we can sneak in. It's like we're the only non-local vendor, and they're like, wait, we brought you in. And I'm like, oh, I feel special. So, I think that's really cool. And even the fact that like your camera can help you travel, I think is another reason too. Like, people are like, why be a wedding photographer? I'm like, well, just because it can be cool. It can be awesome.
Fun.
Let's talk about your work. I think you're the first photographer that was on the Harper's Bazaar, like literally, I think that it's such a crazy title, the best wedding photographers in the world.
I know.
Yeah. So no pressure. But you get all the claims. So if your episode comes out before, so I actually were interviewing somebody on the list like later today. Do you know John Dolan here in the States?
I know John. Yes, I love John.
Yeah. He's and we'll talk about this at the end of the episode, but I always ask other guests, I'd say, all right, who's your eyes on? Like, who should I talk to? Who's your hero? Even if it's obscure, and somebody from New York City was like John Dolan.
I second that.
Okay. Yeah. So we're really excited about that. But let's talk about you, the Harper's Bazaar best photographers in the world. That's insane. But well-deserved.
Thank you.
What, like, Uh-oh, we lost her. There we go.
I'm back. I think there's a English weather. 1 minute, it started really dull and now it's gone bright. And so I can see myself looking quite pasty. Let me see. There we go. Let's see if that helps.
I love it. I love it. Listen, this is a bad American joke, but Emily, you're the best looking Harper's Bazaar photographer we've ever had on the podcast.
Wait, you haven't seen John yet. You don't know.
yeah, exactly. So you're at the top.
Now I am. Okay, I like it. Thank you.
Yeah. I'll let you know after. I'll text you. But so yeah, tell me a little bit about, I think it's hard for photographers because I'm like, describe your work, right? And I think, you're going to be very humble about it and you just be like, it's editorial and pretty, which is very fair and I think awesome. But yeah, tell me about, what is some of your favorite work that you've created? What does that look like? And why is some of it your favorite? And how did you get to creating that? What were some of your processes to make it?
Pure weddings or everything, like all of it?
Whatever you want. I'd say weddings though. I'd say like what's your
weddings? Yeah.
An ideal, not a shit show. Like what's your ideal wedding? And you're like, how did you make the images you wanted to make?
Yeah. So I don't know if that's the same for you. Maybe it's what I call, the complex of a creative or of an artist is, I don't know if you ever have a favorite because you always, there's that thing I could have done better or there's this, okay? So I don't think I have.
It chasing the dragon here.
Yeah, and especially here where weddings has like been banned for a year and I've seen a lot of my stuff, like my old stuff. Completely set up.
Yeah.
So now it's a bit hard to pick my favorite. My favorite is about to come, I hope soon. But
I
think for me, the best is when I have a couple who's excited about photography and keen to, trust me and play. I'm very aware that it's their wedding day, so I don't want to. I don't want them to spend too many hours, portraits and things like that, but I want them to be excited so that we can, be sure they have a hell of a good time just enjoying themselves, but we can give them that photography they want. So that would be a good starting point. And then I love weddings with personality. So whether it's through the way they dress or, and I can get a sense of their culture, or their background or where their guests are from, the human aspect of it and a little bit the anthropology side of it is where for me it's the most exciting. So I think I've had so many over the years for completely different reasons. One that I really enjoyed recently was one in Madrid because it was something I've never done, and not so much for the size of it, but I think the fashion and people there and the culture and women were really confident in themselves. I enjoyed that. Yeah. I really enjoyed that side of things. So, I think that kind of, and there's one image I got of it where it's this, which is pinned on my wall. This woman has this amazing hat and then she's smoking a big fat cigar, and enjoying herself. And I think that channels a bit what I like about my French culture, where it's comfortable. So I think that for me is what I like a lot. But I think I'm lucky to now, in the last few years, to have couples that maybe resonate with that. So they all have something that is really interesting. They comfortable with their personality and they express that maybe through their clothes or just the way they are or the kind of weddings they organize, and trying to channel that and to capture that in my photography so that it comes out. That's when I have a hell of a good time. Yeah.
I love that. I love what you said too about the kind of the anthropology aspect about it, about weddings. Like for me, that's probably my favorite thing, for me. Like I grew up in a small town, single parent, my parents didn't go to university or college or anything like that. And it was fine. We were very content and it was great. But I played music and, there's no music scene near us. And it was always happening in the city, right? It was always happening in the big city, 2 hours, 3 hours away. And I always say I didn't see like a real mall until I was in college, like a proper American mall, which is crazy for Americans. You think of like malls and McDonald's and all kinds of other stuff. But, and then now, and it was a pretty homogenous culture, where I grew up, right? Like most people look like me, whatever. And then now I'm in DC where, one, its nickname is Chocolate City, in the States,
I
right?
didn't know
So
that
primarily,
one. Yeah.
yeah, primarily African American. It's where go-go music was invented, where Marvin Gaye was born, like is where
Oh,
I live.
amazing.
And,
Yeah.
and then also too little other things, like I was doing some work for a nonprofit in Ethiopia, which one, you'd never think this little guy from this tiny state would go to Ethiopia, but was doing work there. And that was really cool. But then I came back and I found out that DC is the largest Ethiopian population outside of Ethiopia. And so that's so cool. And then you start making connections here. And, my camera has taken me to, lots of different countries and states and people. And, like where we grew up, I joke, I was like, yeah, we've never been to a Jewish wedding. I don't even know if we knew any Jewish people, and now I shoot Jewish weddings all the time. And there's a huppah and a hora. Yeah. And the camera and the curiosity behind us, helped us get there. And so I love that you said that, because I'm like, I'm always chasing that down. I'm kind of like a curious, a really large white bearded curious George, where I'm like, I want to find out more what's going on. So
exactly. And I think it's also, I've got very sort of versatile type of clients, but I think it's maybe because I don't want to shoot exactly the same way for every couple or every wedding. And, they've got their personality. You've got the families coming together. The location's not the same. If it was exactly the same all the time, I think I would probably get bored. But then it's just, it's nice to look at their, story and people if you get to experience sort of different religions and countries and cultures, or if you see when you've seen people come from two different places getting married and their family meeting for the first time on that day, and you're like, is this going to work? Is it not going to work? And it works. And even sometimes they don't understand each other, but it works.
Totally.
I think it's something John Dolan is probably going to be the best to talk about, because he always talks about a historical aspect, and I think that's why his work and his philosophy really resonates. But I'm really interested in all that, definitely.
Yeah. No, I love that. Yeah. How do you balance, I want to ask you, as a photographer with, every client has kind of, their unique takes, and there are some photographers that are, they find their groove, right? And maybe what they show online at least feels like they're in a groove, and they're like, 20 of my weddings are very similar, pretty, on the same page. And if they like that, it's totally fine. I think that's okay, right? Like, I always say your mortgage doesn't care if you shot at the same venue twice. So there's a balance of making money as an artist, but for you, how do you still or maybe is this something you don't care about? I don't know. How do you still make it look and feel like Emilie's work, at least for the stuff that you end up posting? Maybe not for the client, but for you, if you're going to share something, how do you still make sure that it's you? Or does that not matter? And you say, I try to do it, my way.
I try to have consistency in terms of the feel and the editing, because, but I don't necessarily want it all to look the same or attract attract the same type of, by same type of clients. I mean, in terms of how they would dress and be and all that stuff, or the same venue. And so for me, the big focus is I want it to feel real and genuine. That is something that's always in the back of my mind. I don't like any emotion that come across as forced.
Totally.
Because or cheesy or anything overly posed. I like it to look cool, or I know editorial is a bit, but has a bit of that flair of something, or a bit more that makes you turn pages in magazines, like, oh, cool. But I want to make my couples look good, and their guests look good, and whatever they look like, tall, small, this or that. For me, that's really interesting, is to get someone to, they look at a picture and it's like, I like it. And then, a lot through my editing, I think that's where I spend a lot of time to keep the consistency. So when you look at it, I hope, even if the weddings are completely different, it's sort of, you could tell it's my work, or it's from the same person. Yeah.
No, Totally. No, I love that. Yeah, because it can be hard, as photographers, because you might have. I always say I might have liked a certain wedding. The couple was cool. We shot it,
Yeah.
and then as I've grown and gotten more, just better at curation and better at like,
Yeah.
okay, what fits the goal and vibe.
Mm.
You start to feel guilty. You're like, oh, this doesn't really fit.
Yeah.
The stuff I want to share. But at the same time, you're like, I liked this wedding and I would shoot it again, but maybe it doesn't necessarily fit. But I think too, that's an old school artist thing anyway, is like, well, of course, not everything makes your portfolio.
I'd say a
So you
lot of
shouldn't
it
feel,
doesn't make it.
yeah, that should be the way, the way it happens. So it's like, I shouldn't feel bad that it doesn't make it, but at the same time, it's nice to be, excited for clients. I want to be pumped for them. So, I'm reconciling that right now, because I used to be that photographer that blogged everything, right? Because when you're trying to build,
it's such a tricky balance, I think, because you don't want anyone to be upset. What are you sharing? What are you not sharing?
Yeah.
Right? I admit I've never had too many issues or people questioning it.
yeah,
I don't have people
I've
asking
had
me.
one.
Out of it's not too bad, isn't it? I do I also have a lot of clients who ask me not to share. So there's stuff that I'm dying to share that I can't.
Yeah.
So that's another issue. But I think the hardest is to curate your work and to be selective and to be strong. And that photo that, I love it, but that mimic is not great, or that hand is a bit crooked. This is where, you have to start being a bit more
selective.
Yeah. So if you want it to be, I feel that's what's helped me improve my work. And for that, sometimes I have friends that I love their eye and I trust them. And once in a while, I'm like, hey, that one's not great, is it? It's like, listen, it's nice, but no, it's not great. But you're like, okay.
Yeah.
And I think that's really, we all need a few friends like that,
No, totally. That's one thing I feel like photographers, we miss, where like our business grows up. And so we're doing well, right? And we have succeeded at making art as a business.
Yeah.
But then, I can't think of the last time, that a photographer said, hey, what are you thinking there? What was your process to get there? Or why did you post this way? Does that align with what you usually do? All that kind of stuff. But that's what I do for my mentees. And like, once we find out like, hey, what do you want to do in the world, right? I'm like, what do you want your purpose to be? And it better be bigger than photography, do these images match up with that, right? If your brand is about joy and, like letting the inside out, but you've got a couple with their eyes closed and they look sad, I probably would, it's not going to match up. And, or, just we're prone to make mistakes or get lazy if we don't have, some critique. But also photographers have lots of ego, so we're nervous. We get scared and we're like, who are you to tell me, about this, or you don't understand me. So, it's a hard thing for sure.
And also your personality, understanding that, your strengths, or I have a friend of mine, she's a photographer in Australia. God, she's amazing at, I don't know, she does it, but get out of women that kind of sensual and be sexuality comfortable in a super elegant, way. And it's probably her energy and how she is and how she's capable to talk to people and even ask those questions that I would never that's how she channels that. And, trying to emulate that, it probably, if I tried, it probably look silly or, and I think that's something to understand even when you're showing your photos. Is like, once in a while you might have one and it's great, but can you actually do that? Like based on who you are and what you can, understanding your strengths and weaknesses, it's all combined and nothing is wrong with that. But I feel that's also, that's really important as well, so that you can attract the right people and where you're going to be the best at it with them and you're going to be the right fit with them and they're going to be the right fit with you.
That'll preach right there. That's the clip is, is kind of finding your sweet spot. I found, for the stuff that I think of the work that I want to make that I don't want to sell per se, and that's only in the last 2 years as we've like had some time to say, okay, I want to go shoot some just creative portraits. Like I never do that, right? I shoot couples, right? But I never, shoot a solo person that often,
Really?
Might be a bride or a groom. Yeah. And just kind of like, I feel a lot of photographers, when we first started, we would shoot everything, right? Like the person who made your coffee, you're like, what are you doing this afternoon? You want to take some photos? And then you build a business and you never shoot for yourself or yeah. Yeah. Cause it feels like work, right? People are like, oh, I bet your family photos are great. And you're like, my iPhone is incredible.
I know. It's like, I don't want to carry the weight.
Yeah. 100%, 100%. But, speaking of that photographer that you're inspired by, I have found for myself, if I like something, that's where I will, I'll try to set up a free shoot with models or friends or people who, have that similar thing. And I'll try for fun, kind of in like a music way of like trying to learn an etude by somebody else, just for the respect aspect of like, okay, what are they doing here? Let me analyze. And even if I never incorporate it into my wedding work, it's like a workout. It's good. It's been really fun.
Yeah. No, I think also getting out of your comfort zone and not always doing the same thing is key, which is kind of what you're doing there, right? Is testing and getting inspired by other things and always feeding that inspiration, not just in photography, but in a bunch of other, fields as well. And then it will kind of someday, somehow, a few months later or 2 years later, it's going to feed back into your work, in a way that you might not be fully aware of. But I think it's definitely finding that creative process and based also on your personality and what you can do. And, it's a lot of the interaction with the person. So some people will interact more or less. That's a personal choice. And but understanding, that it's all in balance. Out of your comfort zone, understanding your strengths, pushing yourself further, things.
Yeah. Well, even like, I think like practically, right, lots of photographer friends of ours, have, maybe a preset, or maybe we just love the look of their work, right? Mm-hmm. But it's not ours. And you're like, okay, I don't exactly want to just redo everything I do with their stuff. Although some probably late nights we want to, we're like, I just want to throw it all out in the trash and start over. But when I get to try something else, that's where I'll kind of experiment and have fun and like, okay, let me try to not edit like I normally do, or let me try to not shoot like I normally do, or, speaking to the personality thing, I literally in my mind, I was like, it'd be really weird to do a shoot where I didn't talk at all, but I should try that and see if I can give direction, or only give direction and maybe don't ask the questions I ask or say the things I say to get the reactions I need.
But do you give yourself, I do that. I'd be in sort of a year, give myself a challenge. I look at my work and I was like, okay, all right, that's not, I remember for a long time, I barely shot, portraits. And I was like, right, this year you're going to do a bit more. And now I almost have sometimes the other problems. Like, I need to come back, or I will say, right, you're going to do, once I've got some shots and I know that I can, or if I have a second shooter and I've got a bit of a backup, I might say, one year I did the dance floor, I'm going to shoot it on 50 or 85 mil if the light and the situation allows it. And suddenly there's like a few shots that on the dance floor that are awesome. And there was one that way it just worked because there was a bit of glow lights from the top. And so they're dancing, you have pieces of skin, and I don't know, it just worked. And I was like, then the other one it didn't.
That's awesome.
Challenges, I found, like challenges every year, right? You're going to try so that we progress a bit. Otherwise it's, definitely have to evolve the work.
No, totally. Yeah, I definitely picked something, with the exception of last year, both like business-wise and photo-wise. And I'm like, okay, what do we want to be paying attention to? What do I want to be thinking about when I drive up to the wedding and say, okay, what are we going to be really attentive about? And exactly like you said, sometimes you'll leave and you'll be like, oh, because I was so attentive to this thing, I forgot to do my normal, whatever.
I know.
And hopefully the client's okay with it. Obviously, most of the time they won't even notice, maybe, if it's depending on how structured it is. But no, I definitely think that. I think, I didn't know if we were going to go here. Something I struggle with as a guy, or maybe just I'm lazy or whatever, is because of the submission and being featured industry, especially in the US, is so big, and there's a focus on details and flat lay and all this kind of stuff, which I don't mind shooting, but the creation, showing up to a hotel and having to
Put it together.
take the ingredients. Yeah, take the
I know.
ingredients that they gave you
I
and
know.
say, we need you to make a Michelin star meal or a five,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
or just a normal
Like,
French
I'm
meal.
good with
But it,
this. I'm not good with that.
yeah, and it's like I've had Rebecca Yale on the podcast. We've talked a little bit, and I've read the composition books, and I think at some level too, I like, but I'm too. I haven't bought any, styling pieces. I haven't bought the sticky tack or the thumbnail, or everything. But and it's a balance because most of my couples I don't think care too much. They're like, hey, just have a photo of it so that we know what it looked like. But they care about people over possessions. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that's my sweet spot, is like hunting for moments, and anticipating them, and getting. I always like to interpret the wedding through other people's eyes. Is kind of like how I look at it. And so the couple can look at that and go like, oh, Uncle Joe or my mom, I didn't know she was crying, but she is. And but it's like, to be featured or published or whatever, like my person who submits weddings for me, she'll be very upset if there's no flowers or anything for me to share. So I'm like, oh.
It's a delicate balance, isn't it? Because you need to do that, and also depending if you're working with planners and all that, they would like a bit of that to show what kind of work they can do. I found I try to get second shooters that are great at that, so I can focus a bit more on moments. I will do it too, but I'm the same as you. I know my strength is not to do a lay flat or take a picture of the dress hanging on the wall. I'll take a picture of the dress on the wall if something speaks to me and I don't know, it looks cool or there's a light, or I will do the lay flat. It's the same way. If there's a cool texture and I'm like, oh, that would be quite nice on that, we'll do that. Or if, of course, if the couple ask and you do it.
Sure.
But I'm the same as you. I think people, and that's, I say it very honestly to couples, it's the human aspect, and I do like a bit of zazz and fashion and stuff, and I'll bring a bit of that. But it's people, it's the human. In 40 years' time, what's going to matter the most? Is it going to be the lay flat, or is it that cool interaction between two of your friends, or touch or holding, it reminds you of someone? Like, that for me is definitely what's more like what I kind of want to shoot. Sounds like you're the same. Yeah.
No, totally. Yeah, I definitely. I want to just hang out with people, shoot people, get laughs. Like, it's one of those weird things, and I struggle with this, but I talk to people like you, or there's a photographer in New York named Sam Blake.
I don't know if you know Sam. Yeah, I love Sam.
Yeah, she's been on. She's wonderful. Listen, I have all the best people. We're trying to get all the
you're good at
we're gonna throw like a big party and invite everybody. But something I was telling her was this balance of, when somebody laughs, right? And you have 3 photos of them, and probably none of them are the most flattering, right? Because 100 years ago, nobody smiled in portraits, right? Because our jaw structure was the the best. But they're laughing, they're having a joyful time, and it's I struggle with that. And I was joking with her, and I was like, you would never post a laughing photo on your your Instagram page. And she was like, probably not, because the jaw structure and the flattery was just not there. And I'm like, would you deliver it? And she was like, sometimes, and I'm trying to feel that out, because it's like, on a client perspective, I know they want to look good. I know that we want to flatter them and make them look as awesome as possible.
It's that,
but I also,
finding it's what I call the ugly cry, or the cry, funny face that still looks okay.
Yeah. What's the Emilie thinking about that? Like, are you, or is there something you look for? Is there something you're like, okay, I usually look at their chin, and I'm like, okay, yeah, we can keep it in.
I'm quite picky about that. I'm quite picky of a hand shape, a mimic. And if you sometimes if I see photos where it's posted and it's that with mimic, I'm like, just put yourself in that position. Something you do like the photo as maybe the photographer, but that mimic is that, and it just conveys something, if the eyesight's a bit too high or too low, and it's not, I think if you really want it to be strong, you need to look, a couple photos after or before if you've got it. And sometimes you don't. Yeah. Sometimes it's like, shit. Sorry, can I say that?
Yep.
That's my French absolutely. Side, so it's nobody comes on.
Yeah, you're safe here.
You don't have it. You just don't have it. And sometimes it's accepting that you're not going to get everything. But I am pretty picky about that. And I think also clients sense that when they look at the photo. It's like, oh, this seems like in the moment natural, but they look great. So if you know, imagine when you're looking if you were looking for a photographer and taking pictures of you, and what are you going to look for? And you're going to be like, wow, these guys look great. They look happy. They look like there's a good vibe, or, you know, whatever speaks to you. But, and yeah, sometimes just a mimic, you know, that little mouth thing, it just changes yeah. So I'd say I'm a bit picky too about it.
I love that.
Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah. Definitely.
It's like it's hard because we're a service-based industry, but I always think about like, this may sound awful, but I promise it's good intention. I always think like, as I level up myself as a wedding photographer and my pricing goes up and I'm shooting more in the luxury space, which for me is super rare, like we talked about, or it's becoming less rare. But I'm like a fish out of water. So I'm like, okay, I'm slowly getting in the groove, you know, shooting these 5-digit weddings and these, you know,
great.
Pre-COVID, you know, these, you know, very long days, you know, very featured planners, all this stuff. You know, something I think about is like, you know, in the States, I don't know if the cars are the same, but in the States, we would say like a Honda Civic is the most reliable vehicle, you know, and we're just like, hey, you can have it forever and it's good. It is, there's nothing wrong with it. Right.
Yeah.
But I think about like, nothing wrong with something shouldn't be the goal. Yeah. And so I often think of like, at least for me, but maybe I should change this for Europe. I'll say, you know, what would a G-Wagon do? What would a Land Rover? I know. And I think about that, and I think like, when I think of you and Sam and John, it's not that you've never shot the same photos that we've shot. They're, you know, the work that you don't include looks the same, you know, I assume for most photographers, and it's about what you leave in, and maybe those galleries are smaller, you know, they're not 1,000 images, they're 560, 650, you know, 400 for 8-hour day, but the level you know, it's like, it's the creme brulee. It's the top. It's just the very crispiness, you know. And I think there's something to that. And a lot of photographers don't. At least I know for me, I'm continually thinking about that. It's my current thing that bugs me, and I'm like, okay, how can I push into this thing? But in process, you know, it's something I'm not as good at, and so it's.
But it takes time. And honestly, I don't think I'm perfect at it either. I know sometimes I need to send it to a friend. And they're like, oh my God, you're over delivering here. You need to go it down. You know, because sometimes we have the emotional attachments and we know what it is. And so I love calling someone else's and I'm like, yep, nope, yep. You know, because you're not as involved. And I think it's a great exercise. Us having a look at someone else's work in Cole, and then they do it to you. Because then suddenly it's like, wait, I mean, yeah, it's sweet, but do you see her face? Like, oh yeah, her face is right. And I think, it takes time, and it's always something that we need to work on. And it depends also on your clients. And I think the type of clients I have now, because of their job or, you know, what they do, they don't always want to be in front of the camera as well. They just want it to be quick. But they want it to look great, and so they're also here because they know you like to, you know, they want you to be strong in your calling and you know, selection. And it doesn't mean that I won't add one or two that, you know, are not perfect, but emotionally for them it might be important. You know, of course, and you know, we all do that, and it's like, okay, I'm going to give them that because that might have a meaning for them. But I think it's
totally.
It's not you know, you never fully get there. It takes a long time, and I think you need, you know, a few people around you to help you do that, you know, because it's and you doing that for others. I found that helps me a lot as well when I have to go back to my images.
I love that. Well, Emilie, it's so fun talking with you. I know you got to get out of here, so I want to honor your time and be good to you. So, where's the best place for people to go ask questions, cheer you on, look at your work? You know, what are you like showing off?
Well, yes, you know, everyone can. I'm on my Instagram, so that I would say that would be quite cool. So if people always want to send a message, sometimes I'm a bit slow because I've got 2 kids. But if people want to reach out, or if they're in Europe, or whenever we can travel again, I'm always keen to meet up, and even chatting with you is awesome. Like, get to know and see different perspective and how everyone experiences things. It's always great. So
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Next time I'm in the UK, or France or whatever, I've been to Paris, and
Yeah.
ironically, DC I didn't know was modeled after Paris, and so seeing
There
the
you go.
similarities,
Yeah, did you?
like if
Yeah.
you're in front of the Eiffel Tower and the
Yeah.
Washington Monument, it's very similar.
Well, yeah.
I had no
Paris
idea.
or London with a beer or wine or coffee, then you go. Let me know.
There we go. There we go. Yeah, I'll do the coffee. I'll drive everybody home, is what I like to
Yeah, there
say.
you go.
So.
Whatever you like and some good food, I'm all up for it.
Okay, awesome, awesome. And
Yeah.
guys, that's Emily with a IE at the end, Emilie White, right?
Thank you. Exactly. That's perfect.
Beautiful. Awesome.
Thank
You so much, Emily.
Yeah.
Guys, thank you so much for checking out the Bearded Hog. It really means a lot. If you can, leave a like on the video. If you want to see more videos, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell for notifications on when new videos come out immediately. Have a wonderful day, guys, and keep being awesome.